and welcome to Spilling the Tea. This is the podcast where we explore the stories behind the technology that shapes the future of privacy. I'm Lisa Loud from Secret Network, and I'll be one of your co-hosts today. So this show is all about the real-world applications of confidential computing and AI, how they're being used to solve complex problems and protect data, as well as unlock new possibilities, both for individuals and for enterprises. In this show, we're not just talking theory, we're sharing the journeys, the challenges, and the breakthroughs from the builders on the front lines. And today's guest is someone with a fascinating perspective. Really excited to talk to him. Alongside me today is someone who's been decoding the crypto space for years, Megan Nilsson, also known as Crypto Megan. Megan is a Web3 strategist, a speaker, and an educator with a talent for translating complex blockchain topics into stories that resonate. She works with top protocols, investors, and founders to connect the dots between innovation and impact, especially when it comes to how privacy and AI are shaping the next chapter of digital identity. Megan's got her finger on the pulse of where the industry is headed, and she's never afraid to ask the big questions. Megan, I'm thrilled to have you on Spilling the Tea, so let's get into it. Our guest today is Mark. Mark Rydon is the CSO of Aethir, the world's largest decentralized GPU cloud network, serving AI, gaming, and enterprise workloads. Mark has a background in engineering, mega projects, and a passion for infrastructure equity. He's on a mission to make high-performance computing affordable and accessible to everyone. Mark, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. Should be a very fun chat.
Would you like to give a quick introduction to yourself and what you're working on?
Sure. Like you mentioned, Mark here, co-founder of Aethir. At Aethir, we build distributed GPU infrastructure. So you can think of us like an AWS or a Google Cloud, except we're focusing exclusively on GPUs, enterprise-grade GPUs. And within that cloud, we don't actually own any of those GPUs ourselves. So we're aggregating GPUs supplied by others from all over the world. Those GPUs are all enterprise grade. We don't touch gaming PCs or laptops, for example. We only aggregate the infrastructure that big tech companies need to build kind of exciting AI projects or to power some of the newest kind of gaming infrastructure out there. It's a very exciting place to be and one that keeps me on my toes every single day.
Amazing. And Megan, welcome to the show. Thank you for being a co-host. And why don't you take it from here?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Lisa. And Mark, it's great to be on here with you. There's been a lot of talk about Aethir, this cycle, and for a while now, it's been on my radar. I am big into infrastructure and the pigs and shovels and the things that are going to power this movement. So obviously, Aethir has stood out to me as, one of the key players in that movement. So in that, I'd like to just dive right into it, into the first question, okay? Where we're at the intersection of affordability meeting infrastructure, right? So you've described Aethir's mission as making compute power affordable for everyone from gamers on low-end phones to AI startups. So that's a big, wide category, right? How does decentralization truly help drive down those costs in a way traditional cloud providers can't do?
Yeah, this is a great question. And like I mentioned before, Aethir is very similar to an AWS or a Google Cloud, but we're built on infrastructure that we don't own ourselves, right? So effectively, we're aggregating infrastructure that exists elsewhere. If you think about the traditional model or the traditional path to build a cloud, right? Incredibly capital intensive, right? This is why we're seeing funding rounds within frontier AI models that are bigger than anything we've ever seen in VC previously, right? It takes billions and billions of dollars of upfront capital to build a cloud, right? And once you have that cloud built, right, it's incredibly expensive to maintain, right? The overhead on these systems are higher than any server-based infrastructure that's come before, right? So incredibly expensive assets to get a hold of and incredibly expensive assets to deploy, and then equally expensive to kind of maintain and run, right? However, when you look at a cloud like Aether, right, running on infrastructure we've aggregated from others, the type of infrastructure, right? Not necessarily the model, but the place that this infrastructure comes from is very different. It often comes from a place of underutilization, right? Or under optimization. And when you have an asset that is so expensive that having it sit idle is just burning a hole in a tech company CFO's pocket, right? They become incredibly motivated to find a way to gain utilization back, right? And when you can create a cloud like ours that's just one or two clicks away from the average tech team to kind of take that underutilized asset, that like spare capacity, and redistribute it back into a network of demand that kind of spans pretty much every tech company you've heard of, it's a really compelling uh, opportunity, and not necessarily one where you're overly motivated to make sure you get the absolute top price, right? It's far more likely that you're going to be motivated by just getting rid of this liability, this financial burden, and you want to have it in operation as quickly as possible. So decentralization plays a massive role in being able to reduce cost, at least in our circumstance, because we're optimizing an inefficiently managed resource in a way that big tech companies can't do on their own.
Wow, that was a really awesome answer. I think it breaks down all of the reasons why people are sort of gravitating toward this in companies, and just the general benefits that it provides in the solution there. So thank you for breaking that down for us. Lisa, I think it'd be great if you could touch on the TEE aspect and about why we named this podcast "Spilling the Tea" and how that could coincide with the next question for Aether.
Yeah, so TEEs is trusted execution environments, and this podcast is really all about how trusted execution environments are essential for the next wave of confidential computing, and which is very much tied into AI. A Secret Network and Aether have been talking about how we can integrate the technology that we have that combines TEEs with H100s and H200s in order to make a larger space for a large language model to exist within a trusted execution environment. So it's a combination of SGX, TDX, and H100s, and then a confidential VM. The confidential VM is really the key, and I think this is a really misunderstood topic. The reason that VM stands for virtual machine, and when you have a virtual machine, it takes a bunch of different hardware and combines it into an operating environment that can be encrypted. In our case, we make sure it's encrypted. Now, in most cases, even if you have encryption, you can have a VM advisor who sees the logs going in and out of the VM, where in the specific situation that we're building for confidential AI, that VM is fully encrypted, so nobody can trace the logs. Nobody can see what's going into the model, what's coming out. No one can see the logs that actually happen. So it's truly confidential end to end. And Secret and Aether have been talking about how we can leverage, as Mark said, it's very expensive to run your own hardware. So how can we leverage this lockup of hardware, the software that locks all the hardware together, and Aethir's distributed computing that allows distribution of costs and sharing of costs so that it's more cost effective to run your own confidential LLM. Highly technical topic, but Mark, I don't know if you want to say anything further about how TEs are relevant to what you're building.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'll just like to say that Aether is not an expert on TEs, right? That is why we're working with partners like Secret Network, right? It is an incredibly complex and an incredibly relevant space, particularly as we look through the lens of privacy and all of the data that LLMs are touching in our daily lives. And that is, as a tech founder, maybe you're very sensitive about the inputs that your models are trained on, but then maybe also as a user and the data that you're providing that model on sort of a regular basis. At Aether, we have traditionally focused on uh, what's called bare metal GPUs, right? So when you touch a cloud, generally, uh, you are, let's take storage for example. You're purchasing storage just like on your phone, right? You'll have your photos that'll be in the cloud, right? You're purchasing capacity from the cloud, but you're not specifically purchasing a specific hardware somewhere in the world, right? You're not saying I want my storage to come from this data center in the US, right? And that can be a privacy concern, right? So what we do is we actually give people the ability to purchase that compute at a box level. And once you have access to that box, then you have the flexibility to start installing and working with really interesting technologies like Secret Networks TE environments. So this is kind of a pretty natural collaboration, in my opinion, as we're giving people this base level infrastructure, and then it's really easy to layer on top these trusted execution environments that are so crucial for privacy within the AI space.
Yeah. Uh, so, Mark, I just have a question for you. Your three-role model with the checker, indexer, and provider, it almost feels like a TEE of its own. Can you walk us through how this design ensures accountability and avoids bad actors, like pretending to be good actors? Are there elements of that that really reflect the intention of a TEE?
For sure. I mean, the biggest challenge when you're building something in the decentralized hardware space or the DePIN space is that you're not the owner of that hardware. So you have an element of trust, right? You have to trust that someone that says they're contributing an H100 is actually contributing an H100. And as a result of how incentives are predominantly structured within these networks, if someone's contributing an expensive piece of hardware, they usually get more rewards than someone who's contributing a cheap piece of hardware, right? H100 costs you a couple of $100,000, right? You're going to get much more rewards for contributing that hardware than you would if you contributed, your 4090, which is like a gaming GPU. Now, that difference in reward structure incentivizes bad actors to effectively try and spoof the network, right? To tell you that they're an H100 when actually they're something else, right? So, how do you kind of overcome that trust assumption, right? There's a number of different ways. But what we chose to focus on was actually this kind of three-part system that you've just mentioned, right? Where we have the GPU owners, we call them containers, right? You got the GPU owners, and then we have the checkers and the indexers. Indexers are kind of like they process all the data, so they're kind of just indexing all of the information that's within the network. But the checkers are the really interesting ones, right? The checkers are like this decentralized police force. Effectively, what we did was we empowered people within the community to operate under a license, right? That allows them to check uh, whether things in the network are as they seem, right? Okay, you say you're an H100, checkers are going to make you prove it, right? You say you did this type of work, a checker is going to make you prove it, right? You tell us you did or didn't get paid, a checker is going to prove it, right? And this creates this ecosystem where you have trust at the base level, but then you also have this level of accountability that's managed by this decentralized police force. It's kind of this separation of police and state, which I really appreciate. I think it's kind of foundational to the way that a good decentralized ecosystem works. Um, and it allowed us to kind of scale our network pretty quickly, right? We actually have far more checkers within our network that we actually need. But it allows us to kind of scale into that resource really effectively. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
it's a very cool
Um, it,
piece.
That's interesting. It's an alter in the TEE H100 world. We often use attestations for that purpose, which is essentially the ability to verify that a machine has a signature that matches the signature of an H100 or that it's supposed to have. And if you compare that signature, which is just a string of indecipherable letters and numbers, but the computers can compare them, and you get an attestation that matches, then you're also accomplishing the same function. So it's interesting how you're doing that with a more decentralized, consensus-driven mechanism.
Right. Yeah, and I love the analogy about the decentralized police force. It really helps break it down for the average user as well. So we've got complex topics that we're also making digestible for the not so technical user, and that sort of bridges me into my next question, which is more about culture and about the adoption and understanding of everything you're speaking about, Mark. So gaming, on the roadmap to Web3 compute, you mentioned that gaming is sort of like a core element to Aethir's DNA. In fact, on my YouTube channel, I get asked quite a bit about Aethir, and there's a lot of interest there. So we not only go over charts, but we try to get into a little bit of, the fundamentals there. So do you think that gaming could serve as sort of a cultural gateway to understanding this decentralized infrastructure, kind of like NFTs were to blockchain?
Yeah, 100%. I think I'm a massive gamer. Gaming's in my DNA. It's in my co-founder Dan's DNA. It's very much something that motivated us to start Aether in the very beginning. So absolutely, I love gaming. I think decentralized infrastructure, however, as a topic, is actually one that's surprisingly easy for a lot of people to understand, particularly the deep in sector, right? You've got a distribution of mobile network nodes because everyone hates losing coverage on their device, right? And that's helium. Really easy for kind of people to understand, right? You've got a distribution of weather nodes because no one likes getting rained on. Really easy to kind of understand why that infrastructure would benefit from being dealt with in a decentralized way. Also, Bitcoin, right? Everyone's kind of like favorite OG cryptocurrency. It's a decentralized infrastructure. I think everyone's heard of someone in their network that was mining Bitcoin on a home device. This idea of participation in decentralized infrastructure networks is something that I think naturally people understand a little bit better than liquid restaking and rehypothecation and all of these kind of crazy things that we get up to in the crypto world. Gaming, however, is probably many people's first introduction to digital currencies, right? I think if you've ever played an RPG or any game that you've invested a lot of time into, there's probably some form of in-game currency. So this idea of currencies that are created within certain environments, I think, is something that people naturally understand if they come from a gaming background, alongside the idea of, and I know that kind of Vitalik has mentioned this was one of the reasons why he started Ethereum, right? But this idea of putting all of this time and energy into a game character, right? Sinking tens, if not hundreds, or in some cases thousands of hours into a character where you've min-maxed the levels and you've got all of this epic gear and equipment, and then the idea that you can lose that if someone switches off the server, right? This idea that you don't actually own all of those assets you spent so much time and energy contributing to build. So I think gaming is absolutely an on-ramp for not just conceptual understanding of kind of digital assets and infrastructure and kind of digital ownership, but I also think that, I mean, the future of gaming and the role that AI will play in gaming is going to be really interesting as well, right? Because we're going to have incredibly addictive digital worlds that are going to interact with the AI is essentially going to unlock for us, and there will be obviously the need to transact within those currencies within those environments as well. So
Right.
yes, long short answer.
100%. Like I definitely agree with you on the gaming side. I've talked a lot about this with co-founder of Animoca Brands, Yatsu, who's also a friend, and the whole theory behind gaming, right? Obviously, is I love the analogy there. It just comes a little bit more like second nature to them, those digital collectibles, digital assets. You did mention AI, so I want to touch briefly on AI now as we sort of transition to this topic. But AI unbundled and the role of ecosystems in this. So with AI unbundled, you've created a whole ecosystem for AI builders, grants, compute, marketing, even investor intros. So what gaps are you seeing in the Web3 AI landscape that sort of made this initiative necessary?
Yeah, I think one of the maybe benefits, but also maybe one of the weaknesses that I think is very prevalent within the Web3 space is that we're all very tribal, right? So there is this kind of fragmentation that happens within the ecosystem that's not always, beneficial to initiatives like AI that I think are just almost ethical imperatives, right? They're things that people should be working on together because there's so much important work to be done there. So the AI unbundled is very much about kind of reducing that fragmentation, right? Trying to bring these awesome builders that are building in the AI space together, right? And starting with some of the big ones, right? We have some really great contributors to AI unbundled. Some of the OGs in the decentralized sort of infrastructure space, like Theta and SEO Network, right? We've also got some incredible deep in projects like GeoNet, just a whole bunch, right? And what I love is that once you bring those big guys together, right, then you start to create a really, really interesting place to support the growth of kind of the younger projects that are out there. And I think what we're seeing now within crypto AI is the ability, I guess, let me take a step back. It's the time for AI applications to shine, right? Models and big infrastructure projects, they had the last kind of 6 to 12 months, right? Now it's about AI applications. And the teams that are building AI applications are very different to the teams that are building big infrastructure projects. They're smaller, they're leaner, they're more agile, and they're more experimental. And they often kind of come to light extremely quickly, right? Or they get viral kind of overnight. And AI Unbundled is very much also about creating this environment where we can nurture those sort of products through the things and the lessons that we learned as kind of more established teams, and hopefully putting them in an environment where they can scale as quickly and efficiently as possible and bring really cool AI projects to market.
Right. Yeah, and I know you mentioned Theta. That was one of my earlier investments and just something that was on my radar earlier because of the infrastructure play there. And the same reason why Aether is now on the map for me and a lot of people in a big way. And what you guys are doing is really incredible. So yeah, I think it's really interesting the way that you're able to break down and synthesize these concepts. And this space and this movement is about inclusion. It's about access. It's about equity. And you've talked about, for example, kids in Nairobi and startups in Mumbai and all over the world. So what does that infrastructure equity mean to you personally? And how close are we to the world where compute is accessible as, a mobile phone?
Yeah, I mean, it means a lot. The very first mission that we wanted to solve with Aether was the fact that anyone can go in and watch a movie, right? This cinema is very much the same as that cinema. Every movie is content on a screen, right? But gaming, some of the most incredibly engaging content out there, is limited to only people that have a certain device, right? And that was something that I found quite frustrating. All of these incredible experiences that I had as a kid, I couldn't share those with people that just didn't have the ability to own a device powerful enough, right? So I think it's an injustice, and I think the same injustice is out there from a compute perspective for people either building an AI or also accessing AI. Not everyone can afford, a ChatGPT subscription, right? But what's really interesting, in particular, when we think about kind of this global equitable compute environment, is actually that we're probably a lot closer than people think, right? So you've probably seen a couple of the posts that have been coming out from like Sam Altman and Elon Musk over the last couple of days. I think Sam Altman mentioned that they're just about to pass 1 million GPUs at OpenAI, but he needs 100 times more, right? And there's a 4.5 gigawatt power facility, one of the biggest facilities ever created, right? That's coming online just to power their future data center needs, right? So GPU demands are skyrocketing. They're higher than they've kind of ever been before. But interestingly, on the flip side of that, the cost to get an answer from a model today will be 10 times cheaper 12 months from now, right? So when you think about ChatGPT 4, incredibly capable model. If you imagine the vast majority of use cases out there that an average person would need to use AI for, ChatGPT can probably solve 99% of them, right? And next year, it's going to be 10 times cheaper, if not more, to get that same answer, right? And that cost scaling down of kind of inference or the resource cost to generate that answer is one that is absolutely unlocking the capability of these models worldwide, right? So as we're ramping up GPU utilization and as kind of tech companies are, fighting for the latest and greatest big GPUs and big clusters, the flip side of that is that the cost of producing answers for really capable models is dropping 10x year on year. And that is bringing AI closer and closer to the edge in all of these regional communities and unlocking the power of that compute for, for billions, which is super cool.
Wow, that's astounding. Just breaking it down like that, and yeah, that access and that level of being able to enjoy those same experiences that you had as a kid, I think that really hits home for a lot of people, and that's really, really important that we get it right this time in this iteration of the web, right, and this movement. So I don't know if Lisa, you had anything to chime in, or I'm going to switch topics now to China and their model. Yeah, I'll go ahead and get right into that. So this is something that I've often debated in conferences around the world. In fact, I had the pleasure to have one panel where it was mainland and Hong Kong and just all people from all different areas discussing the difference in technologies and where they're at and, the influence of the government. But for the purpose of just this question right now, China seems to be oftentimes ahead of the West, right, with a lot of the technology. So their cloud gaming model has been booming, right? Because they actually met users where they were on those lower end devices. And why hasn't the West caught up to that yet? And how is Aethir planning to accelerate that shift globally?
Yeah, this is a really interesting. It's a really interesting question, right? So cloud gaming in the West is effectively about bringing PC games onto cheaper PC setups, right? So if you don't have the latest GPU, you have kind of an older generation GPU, and you can't play a new game, you can, plug into a GeForce Now or a cloud gaming service and access it, right? Cloud gaming in China has always been about unlocking access to gaming on mobile devices. They recognize the vast majority of users in their regions are on mobile devices. They also recognize that cloud gaming and gaming in general utilizes a huge amount of data. And what do telcos and telecommunication companies and mobile service providers want you to do as a customer? They want you to spend money on data, right? That's where their infrastructure bills come from. So they said, okay, if we subsidize and distribute a cloud gaming network and unlock the ability for anyone, regardless of what phone they have, to play any game they want, we're going to, pump a whole bunch of data usage through our infrastructure that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So there was a huge amount of alignment there with what they intended to do and kind of the way gamers behaved in the region. But it's kind of interesting when you think about what gaming looks like in the West, right? Because gaming has turned into a bit of an arms race, I think, in the West, right? A new game is released, so a new GPU needs to be released that can play it, right? And then all of a sudden, those GPUs are better than the games, and games get optimized for the new GPUs, and then all of a sudden, that GPU doesn't seem good enough anymore, so the new kind of model is released, right? And that's created this really kind of weird dynamic, I think, within the gaming world, right? And I'll be honest, I've been playing games for too long, since I was a young kid, right? And I remember, playing games like, GTA 4 and Skyrim, and looking at the graphics at that time and going like, this is indistinguishable from reality. I was like, how do people not believe that this is just like the real world, right? And then I would see a game that came out a year later, and I'd look at that game and I'd be like, how did I think that last year's game had good graphics? Like, how was I tricked that this? And it was pretty incredible. Like, it felt like games were keeping up with the arms race, in the sense that, like, my brain was being wowed, right, with every kind of next major release. But now I just don't feel that anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's very rare that I look at a game now, and see the graphics and see the experience and go, that's something that has blown me away compared to something I saw a year ago or even 5 years ago. Like, some of the mod packs that I see for, even ancient games like Skyrim are, better than the graphics I'm seeing on kind of next gen games coming out this year. So, long story short, I think the gaming system and how it ties into hardware releases in the West is a little bit broken. And I don't really know how to solve it. Maybe the efficiency that AI brings to development of games, and eventually the types of games that AI will be releasing, and the experiences that we'll have there, will kind of fix that problem. But the gaming space is, I think we're being rugged a little bit. As a gamer with a chip on his shoulder, I think we're being rugged. I want GTA 6. That's what I want. I want that to come out.
Oh yeah, you and the world, man. You and the world. It seems like it's been delayed for just endless amounts of time. There's lots of speculation that not within the actual game, but on players' own servers, that maybe they'll allow the exchange of digital
That's
assets.
it.
Right? I've discussed that also with Yatsu. So man, that would be huge for the industry, obviously, and adoption of it. So, and on a side note, I'm not a huge gamer, but there are certain games that I love, and one of them is Dead Island. And I'm just saying that because on Dead Island 2, the graphics are phenomenal. I mean, for me anyway, that I'm not a super huge gamer, but the iterations before that were like, whoa, we're in another, like, world over here, and the gap becomes like smaller and smaller as time goes on, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it is truly incredible where we are now. We're kind of on the precipice of, okay, then what's next? How do we get this right? And follow also China's model of meeting users where they're at. I think that's really important as well. And the last question I have for you also coincides with sort of your personal journey. As I keep saying, we have a chance to get it right this time. The last 30 years, and I'm speaking now on a broader scale, we didn't, the information got siloed at the top, and so did the value, right? And so now we have this sort of chance to redo that. And I think in your personal life too, you've sort of had this same sort of movement or thought inside, that you said that you'd trade money and stress of your first startup for lessons learned, right? You've said this before. So what cultural values are you trying to embed in Aether as it scales, and what legacy do you hope that it leaves?
Yeah, this is always a. It should be an easier question than it actually is. And I tried to have a little bit of think about this one. But I mean, my first startup, um, like many first founder startups, wasn't a great success, right? I was able to raise money. I learned a huge amount of lessons along the way, but it wasn't a raging success. It was really only through my second attempt with Aether that I was able to take those lessons and execute more effectively, and bring Aether to kind of where it is today. Obviously, with the fantastic support of my co-founder and our early team. But absolutely, the lessons that I learned in that first iteration, my first startup, were integral to my ability to execute kind of on this company Aether. Uh, what do I hope? What do I hope it leaves, or legacy as Aether? I think, to be honest, I hope we build something useful and persistent, right? Oh, we might have lost Megan. Um, but yeah, I hope I build something useful and persistent, right? The AI industry is moving so fast, and I get a huge amount of energy from the pace of change, and the scale of that change. And I really just hope that Aether stays relevant, right? That we stay in touch.
Yeah.
And I think to do that, it really requires determination, right? Grit and a clear vision of the future, because so much of uh, what we think the next 6 months is going to look like, let alone the next 5 years, is
Yeah.
unclear. So I think it's really on the companies in this industry to have a clear vision of what they think the future looks like, to bet on themselves, and to do some really cool stuff. So yeah, I think we have an incredible team at Aether. We have the ability to execute in this really exciting space, and I'm very bullish on the next kind of 6 months and 5 years for us, and of course for Secret Network as well.
Thank you, Mark. So just to finish off, what message would you impart to people who are earlier on the journey than you are? You've learned a lot of hard lessons along the road. What would you tell people in this day and age, given where we are with AI, given the trajectory that you can see ahead of us, given the mistakes you've made and the things you've learned from them, what would you tell people who are starting out in their careers right now about where to focus, any like words of wisdom to avoid pitfalls that they otherwise might run into?
I think, first of all, it's never been easier to start something, right? It's never been easier for you as a solo founder or you and a buddy to get an MVP up and running, right? It's incredibly easy to code using these different code platforms, whether it's Cursor or Windsurf, or Lovable, right? Get something up and running. Get onto these platforms, scrounge up a $20 or $70 subscription, and stop messing around, right? Because your ability to build something is far greater than you think it is, right? These tools are just so capable, and you as a builder are as well. So I'd say it's never been easier to start something. Just get out there and do it, right? Test it with people as quickly as possible. That's the easiest way to get good feedback. If you're not necessarily interested in maybe building something right away, or you don't have like an idea that you want to kind of avidly pursue immediately, what I'd say instead is make sure at the very least you have one premium subscription to one of the frontier models, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Grok, and stay in touch, right? When, right now, ChatGPT, for example, O3 model is the best one. Play with it, use it, ask it questions, see what it's good at, see what it's not good at. Get an understanding of what AI is like today so that you can understand how much better it'll be when the next model comes out. And that'll give you a recognition of like the pace and the scale and the rate of change in the space. And that, I think, is something you can only really understand if you do it yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So you heard it here. Get involved with AI, because whatever you learn now will set you up for the next wave of AI. Whatever, it'll teach you what AI is good at now, and then you'll be able to take advantage of what AI is good at in the future. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's what I practically preach is get involved now, because it's going to change, and if you're not involved now, you won't really be able to keep up. So
100%.
I do a lot of windsurf coding, and it's capable. It's got some weaknesses, but that's why it's valuable to do it right now. So couldn't agree with you more. I think Megan is having some connection difficulties, so we will wrap it up. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Mark?
No, I'd just like to say thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you to Megan. And it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you both.
Same with you. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. Have a great week.
Thank you. You too.